It's time to review Kong. As I'm aware, and as I'm sure you're aware, that there are mixed reviews of Kong online. Some people really liked it, some people didn't like it, and most people are in the field where they think it's just basically a B movie. Well, I'm just going to say Kong did have his issues with me too, but I generally enjoyed the movie. I thought Kong was a good movie. Well, you know this is getting pretty monotonous, but you know this is coming, so spoiler alert! In my rant videos, I am going to tell you what I think about the movie or TV show, including any spoilers in it. I'll tell you completely what I thought about it. If you want to see something without spoilers, then either go elsewhere or look at my review videos for anime. But if you don't care about spoilers, then you've come to the right place. Of course, Kong comes out the gate as a very strong movie because of the cast of characters. I mean, we have a lot of heavyweights in the cast, which is one of the things that really drew me to the movie, coming from Peter Jackson's King Kong. We had Tom Hiddleston. We all know he's been doing a fantastic job in the Thor movies and in the Avengers movies as Loki. He was in the movie too. He played his role very well. And I'll say this about Tom Hiddleston too real quick is, you know, inside of every monster movie, we all know that this Kong movie is, of course we know it's a monster movie, a giant monster movie, but one nonetheless. And you always have the character who represents the core of humanity. He's a survivalist, and he's the guy who has the intellect and the wit to be able to survive against these monsters that the characters are going to be facing in a monster movie. And he's human. And as we all know, the classic saying in a horror monster movie is that and I believe it originated in Dracula. Don't quote me on that. I think it originated in Dracula, where only a man can truly defeat a monster. And what they mean by that is a true man that embodies the essence of humanity can go against a monster and maintain who he truly is and emerge victorious. When a man himself becomes a monster, like we saw Samuel L. Jackson's character, we'll get to that in a moment, but when a man becomes a monster, it's like he loses himself and he can't truly defeat and overcome that monster. And Tom Hiddleston's character, he played James Conrad, and he was a survivalist character they hired on the trip in order to guide them through the island so they could survive it. He did a great job of embodying that role. I think in Jurassic World, and other examples of that, in Jurassic World we had Chris Pratt. In The Mummy, we had Brendan Fraser, and you could even say, in a sense, even though they're not technically monsters, but like with the Decepticons and Transformers, we had Shia LaBeouf. Well, even though it's not a monster movie, Shia LaBeouf he still kind of embodies that role of being the normal, grounded human being who's matching wits against these gigantic, like, humanoids that are much more powerful than he is, that are intimidating and can be horrifying to the human being. So I'll put Shia LaBeouf in that category, even though the Transformers weren't a monster movie. I'll put him in that category. But that's neither here or there. Tom Hiddleston, I was kind of a little bit hesitant in how he would portray this role in the movie, because he, in the Thor movies, even though he did a fantastic job, he still was playing kind of the spoiled, like, the spoiled prince a little bit, that felt like he was slighted by his father, so he was going to revolt. That was kind of the role that he played. And I remember also in the Hollow Crown 2, he also played a prince also. So it seems like he really brings that regal role to the characters he plays. So I was wondering how he was going to play the gritty survivalist, and he did. Comparing him to Chris Pratt, Brendan Fraser, and Shia LaBeouf, I think he did a phenomenal job of playing that gritty survivalist that represent the core of humanity in this movie. So Tom Hiddleston can play that role, and he can also play this role too. So he did a fantastic job. Then, of course, we also had Samuel L., which you could kind of say his character, Preston Packard, was a foil of Tom Hiddleston. because he was also a survivalist. He was a military general. I don't remember that was the exact rank, but he was a general in the military. He commanded men under him, and he also survived a great ordeal. But his response to Kong killing a lot of his people is that he couldn't see the bigger picture of what's going on with Kong, or rather he refused to see it, that by him destroying Kong, that he was going to upset the ecosystem on this island. These creatures that were underneath were going to come out and wreak havoc on Kong Island and possibly the planet. He didn't care. He just wanted revenge. He, in a sense, became him being a military man, he, in a sense, became the monster. Which makes me also, when we get more of a glimpse of Samuel L. Jackson's background that made him the hardened character that he was, we know he really didn't have a family. He really didn't have anyone to go to. And so we know military life was his life, but we didn't really learn a lot about Tom Hiddleston's character, his backdrop, or at least I don't remember that we did, that showed how he ended up becoming the survivalist. I think he was British Secret Service or something, but they didn't really delve into even give a hint as to what he went into to make him become who he was. So that would have created a more complete foil dynamic between Tom Hiddleston and Samuel L. Jackson. But it was still there, and it still presented itself well. And so yeah, Samuel Jackson brought that gritty, no nonsense role that he usually brings the movies to Kong, and this time he was, in a sense, the villain, and he did a great job at that. And I don't have to say much about John Goodman. He, just like most of the roles he's played, he blew it out of the water. At the beginning, I was wondering when he came back from his career, when he did 10 Cloverfield Lane, whether he was still going to have the skill he used to, and he evidently did in 10 Cloverfield Lane, and he brought that same skill and ability to Kong Skull Island, did a fantastic job. And the way they did his character here is he played off of Corey Hawkins, who was the nerd guy who was right beside John Goodman, and both of them trying to get funding in order to go to, and funding and permission in order to go to Skull Island. And they played off of each other extremely well. Where John Goodman was the believer, he was the man with the dream and the ideas in order to get where they were trying to go. And Corey Hawkins was the guy who brought those beliefs down to earth. Where John Goodman would tell you exactly what he thought, and he might have sounded crazy, but Corey Hawkins could take his ideas that seemed crazy, and he could bring them down to a more practical level so that people could understand them. So the way they played off of each other was, they did an extremely good job at doing that. Now getting into some of the lesser known actors, or at least more lesser known to me, that stood out to me, was we had, now I know I'm not pronouncing her name right, we had Jing Tang or Jing Tian, and she was a Chinese scientist that was with Corey Hawkins and John Goodman. She was with their team, and if she was there for eye candy, I gotta say they did a fantastic job with that, because this chick was beautiful. She was a very attractive woman, and so she did a great job of bringing that to the movie. Not saying Brie Larson wasn't a looker either, but Xing Tang, she looked great. And I gotta say though, that they could have ruined her. She didn't have many lines in the movie, but they could have ruined her character by giving her the wrong lines or making her talk too much. They could have made her seem annoying, and then people would have been like, well, she's pretty, but she's beautiful too. But they didn't do that, and because of that, she was good eye candy in the movie, but she also didn't ruin the movie either. So from that perspective, from me looking at the movie, she did a good job at her role too. Then, of course, we had the comedians. We had Jason Mitchell. He was one of the military guys. He was there pretty much for black comedy zingers, I guess. And he did a good job at that, too. And then we had John C. Reilly. And he played Hank Marlowe. He was the guy he was the first person we see at the beginning of the movie is actually his younger self played by a different actor, and he crashes on Kong Island during World War II, and he's with another Japanese soldier and they're fighting and everything. And I think the story on that is that they eventually become friends. And I was a little disappointed. I guess I'm melding what I liked and disliked the movie about to get together here. I was a little disappointed that they didn't really delve into what happened to the Japanese guy. They were kind of just like, well, he was with me on the island and then he just died and now I'll have his sword and he was my buddy. We became best friends, but we didn't get any flashback or anything with that to create any gravity to it. It could have ruined it a little bit because he was a comedic character, so it would have kind of sucked for them to have too much drama with his character. It might have brought down the comedy he represented, maybe, but I would have liked to know a bit more what happened to that Japanese pilot. That would have been pretty good to know. But in any case, those two guys did a fantastic job at the comedy. The comedy wasn't illy placed. There wasn't zingers every few moments like you usually see in an Avengers movie that kind of ruined the drama that was going on. So those two comedians did a good job at being the fools in this movie. So I have to congratulate them on that. Okay, now out of all these characters I've listed, one of them I didn't mention deserves a special shout out. Of course, we know Tom Hiddleston, Samuel Jackson, and John Goodman are amazing actors. And John Riley, we know that now that I think about it, he is a pretty big comedian. I haven't seen him in anything lately, but he is a big time comedian too. And you could also consider him a heavyweight. And he brought in this movie too. But the actor that I thought that really deserves a special shout out, because I don't know anything he's from, but he really stood out to me in this movie, and that was Shea Wigham. Of course, I don't know if I'm pronouncing that right either. I always say that, but Shea Wigham. The role of this man was a serious career soldier like Samuel Jackson was, but he was a bit more chill with it. He was serious, and it seemed like he didn't have anyone to go back home to, and he basically followed Samuel Jackson. He was like Preston Packard knows best, and he's a general. We have to follow what he does, and he knows what he's doing. But even when things got at the worst in the movie, like there was a scene where Samuel Jackson finally did, in a sense, remember this is a rant, he finally did in a sense defeat King Kong by outsmarting him. He was about to blow up King Kong, and there was a kid in the movie, I can't remember his name, I'm sorry, but he was in the movie and he was kind of the morality pet of the entire troop, where basically he was the young naive person in their troop, and wherever direction he went, you kind of knew that it was the right direction, and the troop cared for him because he was kind of like the son of the entire military unit. And when he decided to go against Samuel Jackson was still going to, I could have saw Samuel Jackson killing the kid and continue on with his mission, because Samuel Jackson was so into what he was doing. He was like, I'm going to do this no matter what. I've screwed the environment, screw what the bigger picture, I'm going to kill Kong. And when this kid finally turned on Samuel L., Shea Wigham's character went and he didn't turn on Samuel L., but he put his gun down. It's like he was a serious career soldier, but even he didn't become that monster. He managed to maintain that sense of morality that kept him being a man inside this movie. And it really made his character stand out to me, where he was like Samuel L., but he was still different and good different. And also there was when his character died, which under any other circumstances, I would have thought the way his character died was funny. When he pulled the grenades, and that is also what made him such a good actor in bringing this character to life. Because when he pulled the grenades and he was waiting for the monster, he was going to sacrifice himself in order to kill that monster. But the monster was smart, and which was also very disturbing too, and how intelligent these giant creatures were. But the monster could see what he was trying to do, and it knocked him away, and he blew himself up instead of killing the monster. Under other circumstances, you could see that being a comedic moment in this movie. But because his character was so awesome, and because he was a cool badass character too, but he still managed to maintain his humanity, I was really sad when his character died. That comedic moment was turned into a real dramatic moment by the way this man portrayed this character. For that, he gets an honorable mention as being best of the show to me in this movie. Even though we know that the big time actors did well too, but out of the characters I didn't know, he was best in the show. Putting the actors aside, let's get a little bit into the movie itself. I hate to be structuralist in anything I do, but when I look at Kong Skull Island, I have no choice in my mind but to compare it to Peter Jackson's King Kong. The comparisons just seem to come natural, or differences just come natural. So if you're mad about that, you'll have to forgive me, but there's going to be some of that here. So how does this movie compare to the one before, the other reboot of Kong? Well, I would have to say this movie was definitely more action-packed, and it had less terror to me than Peter Jackson's King Kong. In this movie, there were a lot of moments, like when you had the helicopter scene and Kong was attacking the helicopters, you could really feel, I always feel for people in planes, and they're always in situations, bad situations, because when you're in a plane, there isn't really too much you can do if the plane's crashing or something's attacking you. You're pretty much helpless. I mean, I'm remembering in Star Wars, Clone Wars 2, when these Jedi are riding inside of those jets that go from point A to point B, the Jedis have all this fantastic powers, and they can block some of the lasers coming to the planes, which is kind of crazy because it's also a Samuel movie, but in any case, they can block the lasers coming to the plane. And I even was at the edge of my seat wondering if any of their ships were going to get blown up, because if it did, there wouldn't be much they can do about it. So I really felt for the pilots and really felt the sense of terror when Kong was attacking, destroying their planes, and they were trying to fight back, and their shots weren't really, well, it turns out that their shots did do something to his arm later, but other than that, they really weren't doing much, and Kong was just ripping into pieces, and they were helpless in the air. So there was some terror there, but every time they tried to have some terror in this movie with the monsters, it just quite didn't work, because you had all these military men in the movie that were mostly fighting the monsters. So the movie came off as more of an action movie instead of a bunch of horrifying creatures on a forbidden island, like terrorizing people. And this is as opposed to Peter Jackson's King Kong. There are certain scenes in that movie, and it might be one scene I'm thinking about in particular that stuck in my mind, but were certain scenes in that movie that I had trouble looking at. Like when they were going to the land, when they were going through that little ravine, and there were all those giant insects just picking and killing people, I had trouble looking at that scene, because you can just imagine something like that happening in real life, where these insects carry you off. Who knows what the world they're doing to people? We all also know that's one of the best horror tropes you can use, which isn't used as often anymore, but it's better when you don't show the carnage, where you just let the audience assume what's going to happen, and you can only assume what's going to happen when these insect creatures carrying these people away, lay eggs them and all that. Any case, so to make a long story short here, I do believe that the terror factor in this King Kong, even though they were trying to go for, was less than in Peter Jackson's King Kong. So this movie came up short in that department for me. And breaking from that, there is something I'd like to congratulate the movie about real quick, and that was how intelligent the monsters that Kong had to fight were. It was really disturbing to see how these huge monsters actually had brains with them also, which makes me anticipate more the movies that are going to come after this. I'll get to the ending credits later, but if you saw the ending credits, of course you know that there are going to be other movies beside this one that are going to incorporate like Kong and Godzilla and other giant classical monsters too, other kaijus. And seeing how intelligent these monsters were gives me hope that in these movies we're not just going to see giant monsters crashing against each other. We're going to see monsters with some intellect going against each other, which is going to make them a bit more disturbing. So that was something I'll give a shout out with this movie. Even though it had less terror, the intelligence it showed the giant monsters portray did add a disturbing quality to it. And now, ladies and gentlemen, I'm about to get into something very controversial. People might see it as controversial with the Kong movie and how the Kong movies are represented. And it's something that is a classic trope in Kong movies, but it's something that I know from the black community I come from that makes people side-eye the Kong movies. Now, from my understanding, there are many themes that you can get from a Kong movie. Like, you can get the theme that there are certain places that man should not, like, go because man doesn't have the power to tame everything. There are certain secrets on this planet that are far more ancient and beyond man's understanding. And then that of course, that humanity should not disturb nature, that nature should be left alone or something evil and dark will come out, kind of like a Fern Gully illusion. But there's another theme with Kong, another perspective with Kong, and that perspective deals with the fact that we have this oversized gorilla, which we all know. Now, I personally think gorillas are awesome. I grew up thinking they were an awesome, intelligent, powerful beast. But of course, we all know that there's a stigma that racist people love to compare African Americans or African people to gorillas because they are dark creatures with fur, and we also have darkened skin. So they love to compare. The racist people love to compare black people to that. And in this movie, we have. And not in this movie, but classically with the Kong trope, we have this huge gorilla, and this gorilla is going after this white woman. And it's obsessing over this white woman for almost no reason at all. It just sees her and it's like, I gotta have me this white woman. And it goes and it snatches her up, and it's up to the white men in order to save this white woman from this huge gorilla that's obsessing over her for no reason, just because they gotta have her. And that's a constant trope in the Kong movies, and something that makes black people from my community that I know like side-eye this movie. Well, not this movie, this trope. And the reason why not this movie, because they didn't do that inside this movie. I don't know whether the director and the producer saw that and they purposely decided to avoid it, or whether it was done by accident. But in this movie, Kong doesn't just obsess over Brie Larson. He just isn't just trying to capture and keep her. As a matter of fact, he's not trying to capture and keep her at all. He respects her because she was one of the first people on the island that showed him kindness instead of fear, that went out. She didn't have to be kidnapped to do it. She just went out of her way to do it. But at the beginning, that's not even what happened. The first thing that made Kong respect her was when she was out there using her little human body to try and save one of those gigantic bison, where she saw this gigantic bison. She was going out of her way to try and save it, and she earned Kong respects by doing that. So therefore, whenever Kong saw her in trouble, he did what he could to save her. There was no crazy obsession, no hint at that possible trope and what that trope could represent inside of this movie. And for that, I really have to respect the people that did this movie for taking that trope out of the movie, because I don't know how much people classically talk about that, but that's always something that the people in my clique always saw about the movie. So I'm glad that they took that perspective out of it, and that they decided to make Kong respect her as opposed to just obsess over her. Because if he obsessed over her, it would have hinted at that possible trope, and that trope hints at something else. Okay, I'm about to wrap up this review real quick. And something else about this movie, how it compares to Peter Jackson's King Kong. Oh yeah, and I'm not bashing Peter Jackson's King Kong. I'm not even saying that that was the reason a movie was purposely made. I'm more of a new criticism type of guy, honestly. So I think that when you make something, the person who makes it can have their own perspective on why they make it. The reader can have their own interpretation of it. That's reader response. You can the history behind what happened during the Texas time can influence it also, new historicism. But I believe that when a work is created, when something is created, it can create a purpose in itself. And you have to be aware of that purpose that it creates. And it's different from reader response, because reader response to the response that people have to it changes with each person. But with new criticism, it's more like there's a general, like, collective consensus on what this movie means to people, and you have to be aware of that. So I'm not bashing Peter Jackson's King Kong because I had that in it, but I'm just saying that it did, and I'm happy that this movie avoided that. But in any case, other comparisons with Peter Jackson's King Kong is that movie, branching from that movie was more of a reboot that was meant to be a classic shout out to the original, which was good. And this movie had more of the air of a kaiju movie, where you really celebrated the fact that you had big monsters bashing up against each other. Yeah, so this movie was more of a kaiju movie and the other movie was more of a classic King Kong movie. So that's just something to consider there. And then, of course, we have the post-credit scene, which was awesome. And yeah, people, if you don't care about being spoiled and you're here and you haven't seen the King Kong movie, stay for the post-credit scene. You will enjoy it. You will be greatly rewarded, because when I was in the movie, honestly, I guess people didn't think there would be a post-credit scene for a movie like this. They didn't know that this movie was going to be part of the Godzilla/Kong continuity, so they didn't foresee that, and it wasn't a Marvel movie or a DC movie. So when I was in the movie at the end, everyone else in the movie left. I was the only person in there, to the point where I looked around, and I was lucky that I stayed, because then at the end there was a post-credit scene, and it was amazing. I was the only person who thought this was going to happen, but it did. And in the scene, we got to see, they were saying that we thought Kong was the only king. It turns out there were other kings, and we got to see Rodan. We got to see like some footage that hints at Rodan, something that hints at Mothra, and something that hints at Godzilla. And for anyone that knows, that's in the know about giant monster lore, the kaiju lore, is that those three gods, along with Kong, are all considered good guys. Godzilla can be a bad guy sometimes, but I believe classically Mothra and Rodan are always good guys. And I believe Kong is always a good guy too. And so, but the one person that it had in there that was a bad guy was King Ghidorah, where they had cave drawings of Godzilla fighting King Ghidorah in the movie. And I thought that was interesting, because, and I'm going to go ahead and put a theory out there real quick. I predict that the Godzilla vs. King Kong movie is going to be like Batman vs. Superman, where they're going to fight against each other, but in the end, they're going to have to come together to fight something bigger. And what thing that's bigger that they could fight, you may ask? I would give them both a challenge that's that big in Godzilla's Rogue Gallery, other than Mechagodzilla and Space Godzilla. That would be King Ghidorah. King Ghidorah is a gangster. He's one of the big bigs of Godzilla's Rogue Gallery. And it will be awesome if they have Godzilla and King Kong fight against each other, and then in the end they have to join forces along with Rodan and Mothra to take down King Ghidorah. And maybe King Ghidorah will have an army of monsters. I hope I'm not ruining the plot, you guys that did this movie, but Legendary Pictures. But then maybe they'll have an army of monsters working underneath King Ghidorah. It will be an awesome monster smash. And I predict right now that that is what Godzilla vs. King Kong is going to be. And I'm hoping that's going to be it. And that ends this review, or rather rant, of Kong Skull Island. Did you like the movie? Did you dislike the movie? Did you think it was so terrible you'd rather burn it or melt the DVD when it comes out on a stake? Or did you think it was the best Kong movie of all time? Please leave your opinion in the comments below. I want to hear what you have to say, whether it's to the positive or whether it's to the contrary. And don't forget to like and please subscribe to see what more we'll bring here at Mr. Views. And thank you for taking the time to look at my video today. Take care. Bye.